Hi, my name is Sarah Taggart, and I'm an eviction attorney in Alabama. Welcome to the first episode of my podcast, The Eviction Chronicles Therapy for Landlords. Now, I'm not a therapist, but I have found myself over the course of nearly 20 years giving a lot of therapeutic advice to my clients. This episode is entitled Faith, or Can Eviction Attorneys Go to Heaven? In this episode, I'm joined by Michael Rosenblum. Mr. Rosenblum attended Christian schools through college, and after graduating college, went straight into property management. So without further ado, let's see how this goes. So we are going to introduce, for our Tale from the Trenches segment, a longtime friend and former realtor of mine, Mr. Michael Rosenblum. So the reason that I kind of did the podcast on therapy for landlords is I'm looking at things when I have owners or property managers that reach out to me, questions or struggles that they have. And one of them has been reconciling being, I think you said it was just raised with good Christian values, or
Sure.
trying to reconcile what they consider like being a good person
Right.
with being a good landlord. And I figured you might have had some thoughts about that, or especially if you started as a fresh 20-year-old from Christian education. How did you handle your first set out?
So, going back to what you said, to me, being a Christian is not just showing up to church when the doors are open. Being a Christian is how you live your life. It's how you treat people. It's how you try to honor God with how you treat people as well. So my first set out, I still remember it very clearly. It was the first year, so it was 2008. The economy started to dip a little bit.
Just a smidge.
A little bit. So tenants who had employment that were being laid off or let go because companies are having to downsize and cut some losses, we saw some of that, and tenants sort of pleading with us, give me more time, give me more time. And so we had to have a lot of conversations with property owners of, will you give them more time? So, I mean, we're the middleman. We earn a small percentage of the rent money coming in, but the money belongs to the property owner. So having those discussions of how much, time and how much grace do we bestow upon the tenant who can't pay their rent are challenging conversations. My very first one I remember was out in Tony, and kind of a rural area, but it was on a main road. If you're familiar with Huntsville, it was on Jeff Road. So high traffic count. And I talked to this guy for, I think, 2 months. We filed the eviction through your office. And I was just to this point of, oh my goodness, I need to help this individual. They can't pay rent. We had multiple conversations, and I'm sitting there telling them, okay, everything's filed. We went to court. It was a default. So I know the writ is going to be filed. The sheriff and the deputies are coming. So I called, probably not every day, but every other day. Hey, are you getting out? Are you getting out? And I just felt like it was my responsibility to help this tenant not be set out to the street and have all their possessions just set out and up for grabs. And so I called him the day before because we knew the deputies were coming the day after. And like, this is your last chance. And so we get out there. I remember me, my cousin was involved in it. I'm sitting there trying to just find help. The set out is on me. Back in the day, you could just have two people, really just one person, didn't matter. But the house was full of furniture and clothes and possessions. Just a single guy. We showed up, rekeyed the locks. We hauled everything out. It took us probably 3 hours. But I walked in, it was like he had just gotten up. He got a shower for work, headed out. And I guess just assumed that I was making up a story that this day was going to come. And so 3 hours or so later, we hauled everything out. Multiple cars driving by. Hey, what's this stuff? Like it's free yard sale, And so I think the law is like it has to sit out for a reasonable amount of time.
I have given up figuring out what the law is on that, and I'm the lawyer that they would call to ask that question. Yeah. It depends on your sheriff.
It's 5 minutes for one person, 5 days for someone else.
Yeah, it really kind of just whatever the sheriff says.
So we're talking, all the furniture, dining room table and chairs, trash bags full of clothes, dressers and nightstands full of all kinds of content. Can't set out any prescription meds and alcohol and weapons and things like that, which we didn't discover any of that, thank goodness. But I remember I couldn't eat that morning. I didn't eat the rest of the day, didn't eat that night. I had trouble sleeping that night. I set someone out of their home. And so that one took a toll on me. The very next eviction I did, I remember was out in Limestone County, and a family with 3 kids. And so my help that was out there was hauling out, family portraits with these kids and all their toys. And the guys that were helping me were like, I can't believe we're doing this. Like, we're just setting this stuff to the curb. And I remember this young child was probably 7 or 8 years old and goes out to the sheriff's deputy. And he's like, why are you doing this to our family? And the deputy, I'll never forget his words. He said, son, let me tell you, your mom and daddy knew this day was coming for a long time. I was like, huh. You know what? They did. And so I think about being a Christian and having faith. I thought, I'm not much of a preacher, but I think that story will preach right there. That, the God that we serve gives us chance after chance after chance after chance to get things right. And so we just ignored it. We don't want to do good things sometimes, or we think it's not going to impact us, or it's not going to impact the people around us, our families, our kids. But there's a day coming, and we knew that day was coming for a long time.
It's the parable or the story where, the person is in a hurricane on the roof and, turns down the boat because my God will save me,
That's right.
turns down the helicopter, my
Yeah.
God will save me, dies and goes to heaven and says, oh God, why didn't you save me?
That's right.
And God's like, I sent a boat and a helicopter.
Right.
There's definitely a level of that. And, I just think in some time the struggle of the deputy, the first time or two that they have to do it,
Sure.
but then it would almost become mechanical or rote, like that they're doing it all the time. And so, yeah, mama and daddy knew it was coming, but they're still rough. That balance. I have so many landlords that will come in and they'll say, well, I didn't need the money, and so I waited on evicting, and so I gave them chances, and I just felt bad in doing it. I felt like that I was not, God calls us to feed the hungry and house the homeless.
Right.
And then for me, I walk into eviction court, and the first couple of evictions that I did, I had that same struggle. Not necessarily from a place of faith or Christianity necessarily, but conscience,
As a
like
human
wanting
being.
to be
Right.
a good person.
Right.
And then, when you show that kind of compassion or mercy in court, I found it typically gets taken advantage of.
Right.
And I would be told, well, how do you sleep at night? And the answer is with a really great pillow and a noise machine. But it is a real tension where you have to kind of exercise. The law is not unfair.
Right.
I've always looked at the landlord-tenant law with comparing other states. You're looking at a 2 to 3 month lead time. Right. Between when a tenant goes into default and when we can accomplish a set out under good circumstances. That in itself is grace. In the lease itself, the difference between rent is due on the first, late on a certain period of time,
Right.
is called the grace period.
Right.
So when I have landlords that struggle with this, my advice to them is always, if you want to run a benevolence house, I can do that for you.
Right.
If you want to make charitable donations, I can help you with that. But this is a lease and this is a contract. Do you have owners that struggle with that? Do you have a pep talk, or just kind of how do you deal with an owner that's reluctant to move forward?
We deal with all kinds of personalities, and I think there's a
Well, that's a graceful way to say it.
yeah, and we manage them fairly well. I think there's a fine line, I think, or a difference of giving someone grace and giving them chances and opportunities versus enabling. There's a difference there. I can give someone multiple chances, give them grace, show some mercy, but at what point am I enabling them just to keep doing what they're doing? So yeah, we have owners that on one side of the fence, they're a no. The day they're late, they immediately file the eviction process. There's no grace, there's no mercy. I've got owners that will allow it to go on 2 months or into a third month before it's like, okay, I guess we're looking at the eviction. We've given them chances. We had an owner just recently that we filed the eviction through your office. At the time, the deputy was going to show up within a 2-week window. She said, I've got about $7,000 that I can pay, which she owed with late fees and everything, probably close to 10 grand when it all racked up, the court costs and everything. And the owner said, if she can just pay the base rent that she owes, we'll ignore everything else and we'll eat it. And they allowed it. So they were very gracious owners with their personality. So we see two different extremes. And again, we're here to help get you what you want. What do you want? How can we help facilitate?
I have sort of looked at the same thing that you have. At what point is enabling the hardship avoiding someone's basic responsibility? Like, at what point is it practicing or evidencing mercy versus just allowing yourself to be victimized? And there is certainly a role of faith and spirituality in this, but I am pretty sure God didn't say let yourself get whacked repeatedly upside the head with a baseball bat.
That's right.
So there you go on that.
Well, there's, I think, too, you got the tenant side of the evictions, but you've also got the owner side, and we talked a little bit about that, but, there's an aspect of stewardship in what we do, because you have owners who are leaving the country in some cases where, hey, we are their eyes and ears. It's your job to look after the property, to collect our rent, to handle maintenance, handle any kind of tenant concerns or disputes that come up, and they're entrusting us. So I've got a stewardship responsibility with our faith to make sure someone else's possession is looked after. And I think about, Matthew 25, I believe it is, that talks about the parable of the talents. And if you're familiar with that story, but you've got this master who goes away on a journey.
Mm-hmm.
He's leaving Huntsville, going out of the country, and so he gives one servant 5 talents, he gives another one 2 talents, another one 1 talent. And that story gets twisted sometimes where we relate talents to like talents and skills and abilities, and you can make an application for that. But the master gave his servants money. The story's talking about money, and so what are you doing with my money or my possession that I left you with while I'm gone? And so he comes back. You got the 5 talent servant who invested it and doubled it. He's got 10 talents, to give back to the master. And you got the 2 talent who doubled that, gave it back to the master. And I always had trouble with this story that I felt like that 1 talent servant was being picked on at the end. That I thought he was responsible. Yeah, he buried the talent in the ground. And when the master came back, I gave you back what you gave to me. It's right here for you. But he was called wicked and lazy. I thought, boy, that sounds so harsh. I felt like he was being protective of what was given to him. And until I did more study on that, I thought, it's not about the servant, because we put ourselves in the servant's shoes and think that we're being picked on with our talents and abilities and skills or what was given to us that we didn't use. And the whole story, the application is, I did nothing that benefited the master. It wasn't about my benefit as a servant. It was about what did I do that gave someone else a benefit, and it's the master's benefit. And the master didn't benefit in that story. And so if I can protect what's mine, but I can also invest it, and I can look after maintenance, and I can look after rent, and I can look after the property value, and I can do these other things that when the master returns, I can say, I did something for you that gave back to you. It wasn't about me, it's about the master. And so it's a stewardship responsibility that you got to run that fine line with tenant and owners on that.
Yeah, that's a good point, to remember that there's more obligation, just your obligation or your responsibility as a Christian towards your tenant.
Right.
You also do have that responsibility towards your owner.
Right.
The other one I think that's really interesting is the idea of background checking, because God forgives, but Alicourt does not. And so you will have individuals that will want that. Perhaps they've had a past. These are, of course, tenant applicants. They've had a past. They've made mistakes. They want to not have those past mistakes, be them evictions or criminal or drugs. They want to be given benefit of the doubt that they have acted in a way to redeem themselves. And so I always think it's really funny. I once had a story. It was a self-managing owner, of course, an older individual, where they had the tenant apply with them directly. And this tenant has been evicted so many times. And I know this tenant so well because every time she's evicted, she comes to the courthouse and calls me colorful things in fantastically imaginative ways. But when I saw the application that she submitted directly to this owner, at the bottom of the application was written, "Please take a chance on this single mom who's trying her best and doing better." Which is exactly what she needed to say to this pair of, wanting to do well, older tenants, that they trusted her. They wanted to give her this second chance, because that is what God calls and says that, God gives us second chances. We believe in redemption. And so the tension between how do we put a person through their paces to qualify them and make sure that we are being good stewards of our owner's property, but in the same time leave room for growth and development and redemption. And is there a place for redemption in background checking? Because as the eviction attorney, I'm going to say no. That is a hard no.
You don't like background checking?
Well, no, I absolutely demand the background check. I don't think we should give second chances.
Okay.
I think if they have had an eviction in the last 2 or 3 years, that's a no. If they're under bankruptcy, that's a no. If they have criminal charges in certain cases, that's a no. I don't care if they're nice people now.
Right.
But that's the eviction attorney in me speaking. That is, so I'm wondering, has that ever been something that you have thought about, or am I just overthinking things? Because that's also a thing I do.
I probably thought about it, just maybe not as deeply as I should have or needed to. But I think when it comes to background checks, and I've got a story or two that comes to mind, but I think that the background check is, okay, it's there, it doesn't go away like you said, but I think the underlying question is on an individual who's got blemishes on their background is looking at that and asking, am I ready for the next steps? And if I can evaluate that and say, okay, someone had some hiccups in the past, they've got some blemishes on the background, do I think it's responsible of me as a steward of someone else's property to say, this person maybe needs a second chance at this time, and I think that they're eligible for some next steps to be more responsible.
But you also have to be under this ambit of fair housing,
Correct.
Where your second chances that you might give to this individual, I mean, it's a weird tension.
I think it's funny that we try to say, we have to be in queue what fair housing is, but wow, we've got to be responsible. We have tenants that approach us like what you just said. I'm a single mom,
trying her best,
and I got kids. Single female kids. So I've got 3 fair housing classes now thrown at me to try to help evaluate now. And so now we got to dance around that. There was a gentleman who rented one of our properties. It's been probably more than a decade ago. That in his background he had 2 previous DUIs, but it was probably 15 or so years ago. And so I didn't know this when those hard lessons learned. Evidently, when you get your 3rd DUI, you go to jail. I don't think the time frame even matters. And so what happened was 15 or so years ago, I thought, okay, he's not had any other alcohol or substance abuse that we can determine from his background. Credit score wise and payment wise, he pays his bills. His income qualifies. He's not had any derogatory rental history. So that one little thing was just there in the background and from 2 DUIs years ago. And so we ran into him probably 7 or so months into his 12-month lease. He gets his third DUI, goes to jail. So now he's hauled away. House has got all of his stuff. So we actually had to file the eviction to just get the stuff out, to make sure we were doing it correctly. Didn't have anybody around that we could contact. And so the owner was very upset and thought that we had let him skirt by. And so she goes to get herself an attorney, and they asked, we want to see all the documents from your file. Like, we need an attorney to do that. We're just giving you everything. You have to go pay a fee for it. And so she looks at the background, looks at the credit, and tries to sort of blame us of, well, how could you qualify this person? Well, 2 DUIs 15 years ago. My goodness, how much, it's a lot of time span. And not knowing that third one was just the final straw and going to jail. So she got over it, but did I feel he was ready for the next steps? Yeah, I did. And I'd probably make that same decision with someone else. I may have to think twice about it. It's this third DUI coming up. Is it on the radar? Are they still drinking heavily? Let's see what's going on. So.
Well, you see, Fair Housing tried to do that. With the disparate impact aspect, when Fair Housing expanded under the Obama administration to say that no felonies was something that you couldn't say, that you couldn't just say across the board no felonies,
Sure.
You had to have a more nuanced approach.
Right.
It was to try and give tenants a meaningful opportunity to experience grace built into fair housing law. And so 2 DUIs that were 15 years old
Right.
under current fair housing law, we couldn't disqualify based
Sure.
on that because those are not felonies and they're significantly old. And
Right.
Knowing the intricacies of DUI law and that the third strike involves jail time is something that I've been a lawyer for a really long time, and that's new to me, which I don't doubt you, but still didn't know that either.
Yeah.
It's always kind of been a tension between, I gave him a chance. I felt like I should give him a chance. And the statement I always have back to the landlord when they say that to me is that no good deed goes unpunished.
Sure.
And that sometimes when we give people chances, we end up taking a risk.
Right.
That, we are not God. We cannot give unlimited forgiveness. We are making monetary decisions, which is why you have a screening criteria. Everyone goes through it. If they fail, then no second chances, because they don't fit into our criteria for second chances. That's how I always have kind of looked at it.
Well, you taught us well. We gotta have a system of what we follow with our tenant screening. So there are some things that will prevent someone in the background from moving forward. Things just like credit report, payment history, bankruptcies, things like that. So as long as you got a system that you follow, I tell our team this, all the time. If we have application questions that come up, is that number one, do we follow our process? And number two, if we move forward and approve it, can we give an answer to the owner of, I approve this application because of these reasons? And if we can stand by why we approved someone and not feel like we just gave someone a chance just because they had to get a tenant in the property, then let's stand by that.
And when it comes down to it, the owner's not the one that is giving chances
Right.
when they employ management companies, which I have always said you need a management company.
Right.
If you are unable to evict in December by yourself, then you need a management company, because the management company doesn't have to evict in December, but they need to be able to. Someone in the transaction needs to be able to follow through on the terms, even if they have kids,
Right.
even if it's Christmas. We need to be able to move forward because we're supposed to. This is an income producing asset. Which you did mention something that kind of leads into another thing we were going to talk about. Renting to someone whose lifestyle and beliefs might not match our interpretation or how we have been taught the Christian faith. I have some landlords that will have difficulty making that leap of faith, that they are Christian, living a certain Christian lifestyle, evidencing Christian values, and it not matching, and then wanting to have tenants that kind of match and look like or act like them, which when you're a real estate professional, the law says you really can't do.
Right. And
that's still, I will have landlords that struggle with, how do I rent to someone whose lifestyle I consider fundamentally sinful?
Sure.
I don't think you would necessarily have that with your management company, because again, green money spends. And if you treat everyone the way you would want to be treated, which is, I think, the underarching principle of the Christian faith, is just trying to do that. And that's a Sarah-ism. It comes from no particular faith cycle. And so, Father Michael, I'm trying, not you, but the one I'm in confirmation classes with, I think that they don't have to look like, act like, or be like you,
right,
for you to be able to be their landlord. They just have to follow the rules that you have put in place with regards to the structure.
Sure.
Taking care of the structure, making sure that they aren't having wild parties or doing crazy stuff that would be conduct-based lease violations. The fact that they may look a little different, act a little different, I've always kind of been like, okay, get over yourselves. You can't just rent to people that are like you. It doesn't work that way.
I've had two or three people that I can remember that as things went south, whether they couldn't pay their rent, we had to have discussions about eviction, or they left the property and there were damages and pet aftermath or things like that that they had to have security deposit deductions. And I've had two or three people that have chosen to play a card, whether it was race or whether it was their lifestyle or any other preferences. Are we being treated differently because you're making these deposit deductions, or we're not being shown any kind of grace about we're behind on our payments? And listen, hold up. We're talking two different things. I called you about a business matter, and I just had to have the conversation of I thought better of you as a person up to this point, and disappointed that you decided to go that route with our conversation. And they'll usually back down a little bit. So.
And I tend to think the advice I would give to a self-managing owner is exactly what you just said. This is a business matter, and separating the way that you run your company, the way that you run your life, how you try and be a landlord in terms of just how you treat people, versus like what you may believe personally, like two completely different transactions. And the minute you try to combine the two is when, again, you should hire a professional management company. If the idea of renting to someone who is different or might have different beliefs or values than you, if that makes you uncomfortable, just like the idea of you can't evict at Christmas, these are things that you need to perhaps ask yourself, do I need to be a landlord? I think we are kind of to the end of what we have kind of prepared ourselves to. We have talked about just the eviction process, which is brutal.
It can be, certainly.
A lot of things that you run across in contemporary society are brutal from a concept of faith. Like, it is really hard right now, I think, to be a person of faith. So that's a struggle that is real.
There are challenges, and there's 1 Corinthians 10 talks about, whatever you do to the glory of God. And so going back to just the core of our faith, that simple passage alone is, when I wake up in the morning and how I go about my day, again, going back to the parable of the talents, it wasn't about me as a servant. It was about what did I do that benefited the master. And so if I can give an answer at the end of the day or the end of the business week or when I stand before God at judgment is, did I do things that benefited the master? Did I bring glory to God? And if I can stand and be okay with that, with how I treated people, with my faith, and how I gave them opportunities and chances and grace, and how I treated them as human beings with an unfortunate eviction process, did I benefit the master? Did I bring glory to God? And that's what I stand by.
That brings us to the close of this episode. With me, attorney Sarah Taggart, and this is Michael Rosenblum of Rosenblum Realty. There will be contact information for Michael if you want to talk more about his experience with faith or his management philosophy or his company included in the episode. Otherwise, please like, share, subscribe, do all that great stuff. It was a lot of fun. The world is difficult right now. Being a property manager or landlord in December is one of the roughest things you can do. I hope that everyone takes a moment to take some time to enjoy the season and join us on our next episode of the Eviction Chronicles Therapy for Landlords, in which we're going to discuss love.